was November 1965. Deep in the central highlands of South Vietnam, a remote clearing at the base of the Chu Pong Massif was about to become the site of the first major battle between the United States Army and the People's Army of Vietnam. This was the Battle of Ia Drang, a brutal, 5-day confrontation that would shape the tactics and tone of the Vietnam War. The battle marked the first large-scale use of helicopters to deliver troops directly into combat, and the first time American forces would square off against regular North Vietnamese Army units in force. What unfolded in the Ia Drang Valley would become a deadly blueprint for the war to come. The Americans brought mobility, firepower, and overwhelming air superiority. The North Vietnamese countered with discipline, endurance, and a deadly willingness to close the distance and fight at point-blank range, neutralizing the American advantage. When the battle ended, both sides claimed victory. But one thing was certain: the Battle of Ia Drang had changed everything. By early 1965, the war in Vietnam had entered a new phase. South Vietnam, supported by the United States, was under increasing pressure from the Communist Viet Cong insurgency and their allies in North Vietnam, who were now sending regular troops into the conflict. General William Westmoreland, commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, had convinced President Lyndon Johnson to commit hundreds of thousands of American troops to prevent a communist takeover. Among those troops was the newly formed 1st Cavalry Division, trained specifically to use helicopters to deliver soldiers directly into battle. Vietnam's Central Highlands were a rugged and remote region, covered in thick jungle and sparsely populated. The area was perfect for enemy base camps and troop movements. In October 1965, North Vietnamese units attacked the U.S.-aligned Special Forces camp at Plei My. The camp held out with support from air power and ARVN relief forces, but intelligence revealed that the North Vietnamese had far more troops in the area than previously thought. Westmoreland ordered the 1st Cavalry to go on the offensive. The commander of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, was ordered to conduct a search and destroy mission west of Plei My. Intelligence suggested that several regiments of the People's Army of Vietnam had taken up positions near the base of the Chu Pong Massif, a rugged mountain range along the Cambodian border. Moore chose a landing zone called LZ X-ray, a small clearing in the jungle. His plan was to insert his battalion by helicopter and draw the enemy into battle. LZ X-ray was about the size of a football field, surrounded by jungle and near a dry creek bed. It was ideal for helicopter assault, though limited in space. Only 8 helicopters could land at a time. Moore's battalion, numbering around 450 soldiers, would be inserted in waves. Supporting artillery was based at Fire Support Base Falcon several miles away, and close air support was on standby. On the morning of November 14, 1965, the first wave of American helicopters landed at LZ X-ray. Moore and Bravo Company arrived first, establishing a defensive perimeter. Within hours, the soldiers came under heavy attack. Unbeknownst to the Americans, they had landed directly in the midst of a force estimated at more than 1,600 People's Army troops from the 7th and 9th Battalions of the 66th Regiment. One platoon under Lieutenant Henry Herrick pursued enemy troops into the jungle and was quickly surrounded. Herrick was killed, and Sergeant Ernie Savage assumed command. Savage and 28 soldiers dug in on a small knoll and endured repeated assaults for over 24 hours. They called in artillery dangerously close to their position, holding off wave after wave of North Vietnamese troops. Meanwhile, Moore's command post at the LZ Center faced assaults from multiple directions. Captain Tony Nadal's Alpha Company, Captain Bob Edwards' Charlie Company, and the newly arrived Delta Company all fought to maintain the perimeter. Airstrikes and artillery played a crucial role. By nightfall, 1st Battalion had taken significant casualties but held its ground. At dawn on November 15th, the North Vietnamese launched a massive attack on Charlie Company. 2 platoons were nearly overrun. Amid the chaos, American fighter jets mistakenly dropped napalm near friendly lines. Several soldiers were wounded or killed in the incident, but the massive aerial bombardment, combined with machine gun and rifle fire from entrenched U.S. troops, repelled the enemy. Later that day, B-52 bombers from Guam began carpet bombing the Chupong Mountains to the west. The strike was the first of its kind, heavy strategic bombers used in tactical support of ground troops. The earth shook for miles. The North Vietnamese, stunned by the new weapon, began to withdraw. By evening, the situation at LZ X-ray had stabilized. The 2nd Battalion, 5th Cavalry arrived overland to reinforce the defenders. Moore began planning the extraction of his battered battalion. Colonel Brown, the brigade commander, had already ordered the 1st Battalion to withdraw the following day. Just before dawn on November 16th, North Vietnamese forces launched a final attack against Bravo Company. The assault was repelled with a combination of small arms fire and precisely directed artillery. By late morning, the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, was ordered to withdraw. Moore, who had refused to leave his men, finally pulled back. His unit had lost 79 killed and over 120 wounded, but they had held against overwhelming odds. Intelligence estimated over 600 North Vietnamese dead, though actual numbers remained debated. The 5-day battle had left over 300 Americans dead. North Vietnamese losses were likely much higher, though exact figures remain unclear. Both sides drew lessons. For the U.S., air mobility had proven its value. Helicopters allowed rapid deployment and resupply. Artillery and air power could devastate massed enemy forces. The Battle of Ia Drang was only the beginning. The jungles of Vietnam would claim tens of thousands more American soldiers in the years to come. But at LZ X-ray, a generation of soldiers faced the fire for the first time. And history would never forget them. Thank you for watching.